selling a product a drop at a time is just so
Dale
stupid.
DeGroff warned you.
Yep.
I know.
He said selling alcohol one drop at a time is not the smartest business model.
Yeah. So
I mean, you know, I fell for it too. I make 2 of my own bitters. Yeah, there's literally cases upon cases of them downstairs in my apartment.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway,
See,
but that's
the smart way. The smart way is to sell a product that people use by the bar spoon, like agave nectar. That's
yeah, exactly. I mean,
yeah. You get like 4 or 5 drops in each dose of that.
what's wrong with us? I mean, we're like.
Right.
So you don't shun the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The devil finds his groove in them rhythm and blues that sound. It's gonna get you sun in the end.
Welcome back to the Speakeasy. I'm Damon Bolte.
I'm Souther Teague.
And I'm Greg Benson, and I am back in New York from a lot of travel. Been enjoying. I don't know about you guys. I've been
All
enjoying.
of us have been traveling.
I know, yeah, exactly. We've all been all over the place. So I've been enjoying the fruits of actually living in the greatest city in the world instead of just paying rent here and being other places. I went to check out a cool local spot that's been getting a lot of buzz. I went to Schmuck last night, which was a lot of fun. And then on Monday night, the night before, I was at this little spot called Bike Plant on Tompkins Avenue.
Yeah. That's my apartment. Yeah, Bike Plant's the shop out front. A bunch of cool kids repairing bikes and doing good works for the neighborhood.
That's cool.
But we did our monthly Patreon hang, Greg and I, and the Patreon folks. I also did it on Instagram Live just to get some more interest in coming to hang out with us. But I polled the audience on my Instagram to ask what Greg and I should drink. And you know, we talked about it on the hang, but like most of the responses were frankly somewhat unhinged.
Yes, that was the
I'm
word
sure.
you used. And I quibbled with your use of that word because like when you said
and you were
unhinged,
right, I
you
think.
meant like people were like suggesting milk punches, which are odd suggestions. But when you said unhinged, I was thinking that someone was on there just being like goat's blood.
Well, given that I asked on Saturday and knowing that the thing was on Monday, and most of the answers were like multi-day process cocktails, like milk punches and things like that, you know, I was like, no, look, I was just looking at. I should have been more specific. I should have been like, what bottle should Greg and I have on hand to sip on, not drinks, not cocktails. But anyway, in the drinks and cocktails, the thing that was, which means then no 2 answers were the same. Like it wasn't even like, how can you poll a thing where there's not even
It wasn't like a
one
Family
thing
Feud.
there's not even one thing that comes up twice. Yeah. So I think next time we'll give a selection of options and you can choose. But this time I just chose because 3 of the responses had. I
think you should do this or that.
Well, three of the, yeah, exactly. Three of the responses involved
And then
apple brandy.
it's
So yeah, then it's both. 3 of the responses involved apple brandy. So we drank some of the Laird's Jersey Lightning, the unaged stuff. We drank the Applejack 86, and then we drank I cracked open a bottle that I've never opened, the 10th generation. So we drank quite a bit of apple brandy on Monday.
Cool.
Yes, we did. It was quite good, and my Tuesday was quite slow.
Well, you know,
Yeah,
I was fine, as you know.
Yes, I know. You have your rare genetic gift that you don't shut up about not getting hangovers. Trust me, they're not as fun as the mainstream media would have you believe they are.
Yeah. Anyhow, it is October 1st, and that means that pumpkin season is upon us. Greg, I know you got some things you want to say about pumpkins. What's up?
Yes, I do. Well, okay, this is our first show of October. We were recording this on the first day of October, so you know, I can't just close my eyes and my ears and hum and pretend it's still summer. It is officially spooky season out there. And I wanted to ask you guys how you feel about pumpkin as an ingredient, because I feel like pumpkin as an ingredient has gone through a very interesting evolution over the past, let's call it 2 decades, where when it first showed up, and like, I remember some of the early pumpkin beers that came out and like the aughts that I drank when I was 21, where they were actually like squashy and vegetal and interesting. And now when you see pumpkin anything, it feels like someone tried to puree a pumpkin pie and jam it into, I don't know, a beer.
It's sugar
a
and spice and all
vodka.
things nice, right? I mean, it's a pumpkin spice latte. But it's not. I mean,
Okay,
yeah,
but here's my thing: is because pumpkin as an ingredient is actually super duper bitter,
right?
Yeah,
and because we have the bitter guy on this podcast, I wanted to ask if there was maybe a redemption arc here. Like, as we get more interested in like Amari and bitters as a society, are we going to say, you know what, the whole much love to my friends out there who enjoy a PSL. The PSL and I walk different paths through this world. I like that you like it.
Well, I think
I'm not trying to yuck your yum, but like,
I think that's the difference right there. It's nomenclature. You know, when I think back in those days, and I recall the pumpkin beers, they were all over the place. And some of them, you know, quite good, and some of them very experimental and edgy and whatever. But I think that's the nomenclature that the public has taken on, and the persona that the PSL, as you call it, has taken on, which is to say, 10, 15 years ago, when you said pumpkin, you meant the damn vegetable. Now, when you say pumpkin, you mean that list of spices.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And that's the difference for me. And that list of spices, frankly, are also bitter, but they put so much sugar in it, right?
Right.
Like cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, allspice. Those things are bitter. Bite into a cinnamon stick. It's not sweet. We associate it with sweet because we add sugar to it whenever we use
Even vanilla. I mean, it gets associated with sweetness because that's what happens
100%.
a lot. But I think about cinnamon gum, like Big Red and things like that, and atomic fireballs. Like, and those aren't like, you know, it's claimed to be like cinnamon, but it's not really. It's an extreme version of like what you think the thought of cinnamon, you know, but it's not really.
Like banana runts do not taste like bananas.
No,
I think what? No,
but that's the banana flavor, right?
Well, okay, this is a whole other conversation. I'm going to put a pin in this until our first show in June of next year, because I like the artificial banana versus real banana debate is one that I've been dying to have for a while. We just aged out of that season. I don't know. I guess I wanted to run past you guys. It's like, do you think that if someone were to make like low bricks brown ale that actually tasted like a pumpkin, not like cinnamon, not like clove, not like nutmeg, a pumpkin, or if someone were to, God forbid, get really adventurous and do like a pumpkin amaro, can we rehabilitate this image? Can we Matthew McConaughey this? Can we take him from the guy in Dazed and Confused to the guy in Dallas Buyers Club? Like, is there a pumpkin renaissance possible here?
Yeah, it would take the same thing that it always takes. You'd have to do a lot of education.
You were playing that card face down, my friend.
No, it's decorative gourd season, motherfuckers, as the article said. But okay, so here's what I'm thinking: like in the style of tapache, but we use the rind of the pumpkin, like you use the rind of like the pineapple in tapache. Do something like that, and really get all the bitterness from the, you know, like there's even like when I think of like roasting pumpkin seeds, you know, like there's nothing sweet about those, you know, they're seeds, you know, and like, so there's like a lot of cool stuff that can be done. And I love the idea of an amaro, a pumpkin amaro. I mean, Souther's got a Chinar poster behind him right now, you know, and like, I don't really think of that as something that you drink, you know, it's like, but it's actually, you know, artichoke is a flower, which is pretty romantic, you know, when you think about it, that hasn't bloomed yet, you know. But I will say this, for you to talk about pumpkins right now on October 1st, you're actually in today's market, you're about 3 months behind. I'm shopping for Christmas trees right now, you know, because that's what I'm being forced into by the world at large. And, you know,
I refuse. I am going to build my house on the beach on the Florida coast. Like, I will stand against this rising tide of holiday encroachment. I'm like, I would listen, man, I went to the beach for the first time last week because it was still technically summer. So,
to quote my good friend Greg Benson, any beach is a nude beach if you're not a fucking coward.
Exactly. And speaking of not being a fucking coward, exactly. Thank you. We have in the studio with us today the co-founder and managing director of Avalon Spirits, and also the founding chapter ambassador for the New York City branch of the Bourbon Women Association. We've got Angela Bosco. Angela, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for enduring our pumpkin talk.
No, well, I was thinking, you know, Souther and I, Souther doesn't remember, nor should he. It was forever ago, but we did a little bit
I may have been drinking that day.
I may have been too. Maybe that's why.
Whatever you're about to say.
We did a bitter versus sweet I used to work for Pellini, so we did limoncello versus all of the Amaros, and of course Souther represented the bitters. But it just got me thinking that you could you could do that again with pumpkin. Is it bitter? Is it sweet? Is it, what do you want?
I mean, I'm going up to the North Fork to Matchbook Distilling later this month. Maybe I'll pitch it to those guys. Let's make a seasonal. Let's do a quick run of seasonal Amaro made with pumpkin.
There you go.
So did we just come up with another business idea for us on this podcast?
One. All right.
I'm making notes over here.
Another week, another project for us to sink a year or so of our lives into. I love it.
Another week project. But I think that there is something here with it, and I think you're a great person to talk to about this because clearly we need your advice on running successful businesses because we come up with the worst ideas. So
we'll come up with the idea. You fix it.
There you go.
It for us.
Yeah.
Well, I think
the route to market.
Well, I think step one is to go with a product that people already know and like. Like instead of trying to build like a pumpkin tapache, maybe do a whiskey, which is what you're involved in right now.
Yes.
And I want to ask you this because a few years back, I think if people had asked me what my hot take as like a bartender, food writer, whatever it is that I do these days, if people had asked me what my hot take was, I would have said that like American whiskey is kind of boring. There's not really much to be done in that category. There hasn't been a lot of innovation in there. And I think that now, a few years later, time has proven that that's definitely not the case. So I guess I sort of want to ask you, did something fundamental about the way that we're approaching whiskey change? Have there been, in your opinion, great leaps forward in the way that we're like making and thinking about American whiskey? Or was I just wrong and it was always cool?
Well, since I am your guest, no, you were not wrong.
Thank you.
No, I think
that was the right answer.
Thank you very much. Very PC. I think if you think about what innovation was in American whiskey 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was proof and age. And what's interesting about that? The stories were, this is the same mash bill that's been created for years, and it's the same distiller and the same distilling family. And guess what? We got it from a different level of the rick house. It's a little bit stronger. It's a little bit older. And, how many times can you tell that story? So I think, I have to credit Jefferson's, and this is not me. This is fully Trey Zoller and the Castle team that owned it. He always said he wanted to push the boundaries of bourbon without bastardizing the category. And he did it. And some may say it's kitschy, but he did it really with the story of Jefferson's Ocean, right? So the idea of taking it out of Louisville, out of the static aging, and moving it around the world, which really was representing the original route to market of bourbon coming down the Ohio River. And so I think when you have some innovators like Trey, I give him a lot of credit. He got a lot of slack for doing Ocean. And I think what ultimately ended up, kind of settling the score of, okay, this is doing something because you could taste what it did to the whiskey. Mm-hmm. There was that salinity. There was a little bit of caramel. And there was real science behind it too. We sent it off to labs to different technical terms I'm going to butcher, but you could see on the graph that there was different flavor profiles that were registering on the chart from something that was aged on water and in motion versus settling. So to answer your question, Greg, I think that, consumers probably felt like this is a little bit boring and we're open to exploring new things. And that opened up the floodgates, so to speak, to create some innovation in a static category.
I have a question about that. Because, like when bourbon was accidentally invented, but the good Reverend, it was on a boat down the Mississippi River to New Orleans, right? I worked at a whiskey shop in Brooklyn called Linnell's 20 years ago. And the thing is, what was fascinating about that shop was that we were learning from the distillers and the producers, and they would come and do in stores with us, and we would have a nice captive audience, and we would get like the real nitty gritty. But with something so American as bourbon and in that spirit category, I feel like there's a lot of kind of like secrecy behind some of the very classic, parts of it, right? So like, I think what's new now is that we're more open, to expressing the things that make each brand different and mash bill different, and yeast strains and all these things. It's just that what's changed is we're actually not being assholes about it. We're actually sharing the information,
Right.
And but especially with something like Ocean, I thought that was cool too, because like you said, you got it out of Kentucky, and then I just think there's something cool about that, because I mean it to say it that way is, I don't think I've heard anyone else in the bourbon world say it quite like that, getting it out of Kentucky,
Even that innovation of realizing that the motion of the water is going to slosh the booze around in the barrel and make it come into contact more and more with the barrel itself and kind of wash, like literally washing it. Like I picture, like, when you see a chef basting a steak in a pan with butter, right? We're just washing it over and over and over.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. And then that created things like sonic aging, where people, vibrate the barrels. Right. And don't forget, like Blackened, right? Dave Pickerel plays Metallica's music to the barrels because it vibrates them, right? So it's like there's other ways to get this similar process to happen. And that's what innovation is like seeing someone do something and then carrying that on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And just to touch on the history of it, so nice segue into Whiskey Row, but that's what we're doing. We're telling the story of the original birthplace of bourbon, and it all comes from the Ohio River. So Evan Williams does a great job. They have a visitor center on Whiskey Row. So Whiskey Row is a place. It's Main Street, Louisville.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been coined the birthplace of bourbon for a reason. But there's a geography behind why even Louisville is on the map, because right where the Ohio River stopped, where the port of Louisville is, there was a series of falls. And so you quite literally couldn't go anymore. So you had to come off. And that's where Evan Williams, I guess, was like the dock master and created his own whiskey. Whiskey became a currency. So it wasn't just the whiskey was only made in Kentucky. It was made in Pennsylvania. It was made in Virginia. It was floated down the river, and it stopped at Whiskey Row, and it was stored in these cast iron buildings in these warehouses. And then it was blended together. So it was never about the preciousness of the same mash bill, same yeast strand. It was all about the blending. And then it continued on via the Ohio River to other parts of the world, like New Orleans. And so that's what we aim to do, to recreate sort of the catalyst of the bourbon industry and the starting point, what is the epicenter of bourbon, and doing that by exploring other regions of the US. So possibly seeing some cask finishes from other parts beyond Kentucky. I can't say just yet, but that's sort of the innovation trend that we're going to. So we're always
blink twice if it's Hawaii.
Ooh. Personally, I might just make it Hawaii because I could use a vacation. But that's the kind of idea, right? So it's the different climates, it's the different cultural influences and the different flavors, and how do you sort of blend that all together? And you have to start with a really good core product, of course, and you have to create some credibility. But I think, to your point, Damon, the consumer has been very open to explore. And there's a little bit of a treasure hunt that happens at the shelf in retail, right? Like, I don't necessarily know I'm going to go in and buy, versus different, other categories, exactly what you want. There's discovery at shelf, they call it. And I think, we're blessed in the bourbon category to sustain that, I think, longer than anyone else has. So.
Well, this actually gets into something that you said you wanted to talk about, which was non-traditional distribution. And to be honest, I hadn't really heard those words in that order before. So I'm coming in totally fresh. And it sounds like that plays into this discovery at shelf that you're talking about, because it's not only, telling people that you're doing something innovative in the making of the liquid, it's also being innovative in the way that you put it in front of customers' faces. Is that right?
Yeah.
And it's delivered
David's
in a
got
pumpkin.
the pumpkin again. Yeah.
Right. No, I think, this is where, kind of the unseen side of brands. We don't talk about this a lot. So, we're in a crunch time in the industry in terms of what's happening at the distributor level, right? We see RNDC completely evaporated in California. You see Sazerac and Tito's going with beer distributors. I mean, we are at an influx right now of what's going to happen with Reyes, right? And then you go back a couple of years and you see large distributors like Southern and Glazers merging. So it's Southern Glazers now. And so all of that's really great when you're a well-established brand looking for scale. It's very, very hard when you're building a brand. There's all sorts of things that come into it. You know, how much margin do you want to give away to a typical distributor? And does the distributor actually sell your brands when you're at this stage? Or do they act more like a logistics company? And not to shit on the distributors, they're absolutely
Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I still have to work with them. But you know, in this stage of a brand, they're 100% logistics, and so we had to be very crafty. You know, we're not immune to the fact that bourbon could be in a little bit of a bubble or slightly saturated as a category right now. So we think that we've got the proposition that's going to cut through the clutter, but to convince, you know, by the time you get to the consumer, you have to convince so many people along the way that it's just astronomical and expensive. And so we will, you know, in fairness to the distributor, we need to prove concept, and we need to prove rotation at shelf, and we need to prove consumer loyalty. And so we're doing that. And when I say non-traditional, you know, routes to market or distributors, you know, I think another blessing of COVID, that's odd to say.
Well, yeah, oxymoron there.
Yeah. And my mother actually passed of complications of COVID pretty recently. So it's still there. Thank you. But, and she was incredible. I mean, she was a bartender for years, and what a personality. But yeah, I credit her to being in this industry. But what it did was it allowed brands to have a direct conversation with consumers through e-commerce, and then an actual quantifiable ROAS or ROI on what am I saying to the consumer, what is translating, and is that actually capturing sales? And it was there before COVID. Jefferson's was actually the #1 selling whiskey on Reserve Bar prior to COVID, probably into COVID as well. So we were doing the tests, but it was everyone had to do it at the same time. And so there was this great sort of equalizer that if you wanted to pretend like e-commerce wasn't going to happen, you couldn't. So much so that, you know, we've seen some distributors actually purchase, you know, acquire into, as legally possible, into that fourth channel. You can call it fourth tier. And so I think it's a combination of knowing what markets we want to do the traditional 3-tiered system with the larger distributor where we can, where we want to, you know, maybe follow in the footsteps of some of the bigger guys, not necessarily a beer distributor, but maybe a non-traditional smaller distributor, a tier B, tier C even. And sometimes it's identifying maybe just one retailer that, you know, we might want to go direct to market with in a certain market. And so that's a big difference between now and even when we started our business strategy 2-3 years ago. So this has happened very quickly in real time. We've needed to pivot. It's a very interesting time for the distribution leg of it.
Yeah, it's, you know, I've worked with some of these, you know, you said like the fourth tier from like the 3-tier system that we're all familiar with, but like companies like Flaviar and Speakeasy Co. and things like that are distributing in unique new ways. I think it's really cool because there are, you know, we're still dealing with, you know, on a full level here, having to remember which states are control states and like who you can actually sell through and what's, you know, like where you get like proof discounts based on like your like there's so many like, but then, you know, as consumers started to get like, I'm just going to say bored and thirsty, you know, during COVID, they had to figure out ways to get these things that they're reading about in magazines and on, you know, foodie blogs and
following influencers and you know, like all of that.
Generally, social media and all that stuff. So it's like to get that thing that you need. I'm from a small town in Oklahoma. And so whenever I write articles, if I write a cocktail article for a magazine, I got to make sure that my mom can make that drink in Lone Wolf, Oklahoma, or have access to the ingredients which most times you can't. So like,
Yeah.
Where does that lead back to the business model for Whiskey Row? Because I mean, it seems like you said, it's basically a confluence of different, like you've got Indiana, Pennsylvania, Virginia, like all these states who are making whiskey and kind of coming into Louisville. And so you're on Whiskey Row. How do you use that knowledge that you just talked about and like the kind of like modern way of distribution and kind of go-to-market strategy and B2C, B2B kind of like, how does that work with Whiskey Row?
Yeah. So I think very slowly,
Yeah.
because what you need to do, obviously, you want to be everywhere, but you want to be, narrow and deep for as long as you can so that you build up your concept and you build a little bit of, quite honestly, revenue for you to be able to program into another market. With Whiskey Row, our main SKU is called Triplewood. So it's aged at least 4 years in American oak, and then it's finished in cognac and sherry cask. And that's really a nod to the original blending that was happening at Whiskey Row. And we wanted something that just was delicious, not punch you in the mouth, not kill you with 120 proof, not agricultural. So it's just delicious. And I think it's very palatable and approachable. And I mention that because that does sort of open up our markets a little bit broader in terms of consumer taste and influence, right? So if we were just going after, let's say, New York, maybe we would start with our bottled and bond, which we have, and go after the on-premise, which is very costly. So I think what we did was we started with a delicious core product that was a nod to our brand proposition and our nod to the original birthplace of bourbon, and finding ways to make it very accessible from a flavor profile and actually accessible. So on our website, so we don't go through Flaviar or Reserve Bar or a third party. We actually still very much acknowledge the 3-tiered system in the e-commerce. We've got a network of retailers that we're able to tap into that will ship from store to home. And we are listed in North Carolina. It's the only control state we're in right now. But eventually we would like to be able to get into Virginia and Pennsylvania. When you're in a control state, it was one of our better markets for Jefferson. So it can be quite lucrative, but you have to create a little bit of a brand story because it's a very even playing field. And so if you don't really have that consumer pull, it's just going to sit on shelf. So we're starting with North Carolina, one of the larger bourbon markets in the US, is going fairly well. And then, like I said, we've identified 1 or 2 other markets where we're going to pick a retailer where we can and focus just on building the brand through the retailer, through tastings, through, in-store tastings, through having Jade, the distiller from KAD, come up and do info sessions and educational. But it takes a very long time. It's a slow build.
Sure.
But, if we were to go to market with one of the top tier distributor, we would still need somebody in that market selling for us. So we're not disillusioned at the fact that, we're with one of the giants and now all of a sudden we're going to go from 0 cases to 5,000 year one. That's not going to happen.
Right.
You're going to be paying a lot of money in warehousing fees at the end of the year. So yeah, it's just trying to be a little bit more nimble, trying to find maybe some secondary solutions that most people either don't know about or are a little bit afraid to, take that risk. Some of the distributors we're with, you would probably have never heard of them before, so it's more about getting the product to the shelves at as low cost as possible for us so that we can do our job and sell it from, the marketing is such a dirty word, but that's what it is. You need to do that.
Well, listen,
create brand legacy.
We're all in sales. Even the dishwasher is part of the sales process.
Exactly.
Right.
But there's 2 things that I thought of just quickly I wanted to touch on. When, because to Greg's point about not having anything exciting ever in the world of whiskey, I'm kidding.
I'm going to get canceled if you keep this up.
I'm bringing the pumpkin back into the frame. No, but the
mascot.
Yeah, exactly. It's the mascot of the show. you coming from rum and from Jefferson's and Lalo being acquired, and like Pernod Ricard and Diageo and all the stuff. It's like you've had enough. Not enough. There's never enough. We're always looking for more experience.
I'm looking for one more.
Always one more, right?
One more.
One more fix, and then we're good.
Yeah. But like, I know Greg likes to talk about these kind of things, like the influences that come together to kind of get the sum of the parts, I guess, if you will.
Yeah.
So where does that lead us now to Whiskey Row? We haven't really talked too much about the expressions in Whiskey Row yet.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to touch on that. So you're absolutely right. I mean, when you're down in Louisville and you're talking with the people really are phenomenal, and there's no pretension. There can be some stodginess in maybe the history of doing it, but they're so warm. And I think, if you get that stodginess in Scotch too, right? Super serious. And, it's been done hundreds of years this way. What we wanted to do with Whiskey Row is really, I say it all the time, it's the best of the American spirit. And I know we're in a very divided country right now. I think if we really distill down what America is, it's so many different things under one supposedly beautiful rainbow, right, of different cultures and flavors and freedom of expression. And without getting, too political here.
No, let's go.
Yeah, go for
political.
I mean,
have a nice slug of whiskey and just say it with your chest.
And this is what we want to do with Whiskey Row. So it's not just about Louisville. I mean, that is our authenticity pillar for sure. And we have that with Steve Thompson, and, we'll get into, he actually created the brand. But we are going to see with Whiskey Row influences of cultures through the United States. And I don't believe that there's been a bourbon brand yet that accurately captures the true American spirit. It's not just the South. It's not just bi-coastal. It's not just the heartland. It's all of it. And, not that whiskey can win wars, but I think that, now more than ever, there's a really good argument to remind people of all of the beautiful culture and influence that we have in this country. And it can sit in different bottles on your shelf right next to each other. A little cheesy, but that's the next step. So, we've got our cask strength, we've got our bottle and bond, we've got our core, which is the triple wood, to really put the stamp on. We are blending and we are moving beyond Louisville. And, I'll tell you guys here first, next stop, New Orleans. And so we've got a really great innovation coming out in January. And then we're going to move on from there. Maybe it's Ozark, trees from the Ozark. Maybe it's a Cabernet cask finish or a rum cask finish. But it all has to be under this idea of there's a real reason to be there. And if we remember the point of time in the cities of America that were the apex of those cities, it can really bring back some nostalgia and some positive thinking too, and architecture and flavors and culture. So just excited to have all of that beyond a mash bill in a bottle.
I love that.
Great.
That's fantastic. And I don't think that it's Pollyannish to think that using something that is so distinctly American like bourbon to remind people that in a lot of arenas we have more in common than we have differences. I don't think that's a corny thought at all. I think that people, I think, underestimate the power of things that bring us joy, like art, like food, like drinks, to be uniters. And full steam ahead is what I'm saying. And speaking of that steam, you are doing something very interesting with the way that Whiskey Row interacts with Avalon Spirits, which is the overarching portfolio that Whiskey Row is a part of. And as we mentioned, you developed Jefferson's bourbon, you developed Don Papa rum, and those brands were eventually acquired by Pernod and Diageo. So you have experience building out brands and making them attractive to bigger fish, and then, having a nice exit there, shepherding them into that next phase in their lives as brands. In this case, you sort of, it seems like, did the opposite. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like Avalon Spirits was the portfolio, and then you created the Whiskey Row brand to sort of populate it with the idea that there were going to be other brands of that same prestige and ilk joining later. So as we're talking about, I hate the words hacking and disrupting, probably even more than I hate the word pivot, but I can't think of a better way to talk about this whole scale reimagining that you were touching on of the distribution system of whiskey in this country. So how does what you've built here play into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we would like to be the little engine that could, right? I don't think we're going to disrupt the entire distribution chain here, but what
do we just say? Don't think small.
That's true. We'll dream big here. No, I think distributors are realizing their place in the business. And for a while there, I think they may have gotten a bit disillusioned about how important they are, right? I mean, a mailman delivers $1 million check and all of a sudden he's given someone $1 million. No, you delivered it, right? So, I mean, that's a little bit harsh. And with a good distributor, you can foster real brand building. It's just not what their strong suit is, nor is it something that they should be focusing their time on, right? That's a brand issue. You have to build that brand. They have to help you get points of distribution, of course. They should help you sell. But the reality is there are so many brands. If we look at control states, it's a monopoly market, right? Yeah. Like it's not free market at all. You walk into an ABC store and you are being served what has been approved by the board. So good or bad, you're limited there. I think with open states where you have your traditional 3-tiered system, your world is completely free to have whatever brand wants to come in, whatever distillery wants to create. And so that puts a strain on the distributors for sure. It's the brand's job to make sure that they've created something that consumers actually want. I just say that the distributor shouldn't get in the way of that. And the reality is we do need to comply to 3-tiered system. So we do need somebody to purchase the inventory from the supplier and then sell it to the retail on or off premise accounts. And that's what the 3-tier is. And it's basically a money transaction, follow the transactions. So when the very first step is, well, we've got so much inventory, we can't take on another bourbon brand. We'll start with a pallet order. It's like, okay, we need to rethink this. We need to find some other. So at right now we are honoring all the distribution routes. So we are doing e-commerce. We do have a major distributor in a market. We are doing direct to retail if and where we can in 1 or 2 markets. And we've got a sales force that is, boots on the ground. It's so important, brand ambassadors, people that can sell into retail. Our main strategy right now is retail because of the category and the discovery at shelf that happens. It's a little bit, you guys know the on-premise. It's a little bit harder to crack into the on-premise. You really have to foster those relationships. There's some money involved in terms of making sure that you can create the demand and build a brand in the on-premise. So, we do have 10 or 15 lighthouse accounts that absolutely want to be in, but our strategy right now is retail. And we will see which route sort of shakes out the best. But I think what it is just giving us enough of a wider net to cast to be able to build that brand story perhaps a little bit quicker than just the traditional 3-tier system, so that we can go to a larger distributor and say, look, we've sold 10,000 cases in Illinois, let's talk. So
the way you're talking about this, it almost kind of sounds like the Industrial Revolution, or like the railroad or something, where it's like we're forging finally unlocked and are beginning to realize the full potential of this piece of technology that is going to completely change the way we have always done this. Am I reading too much drama into the way you're talking about this? Or is this really just the Wild West where all the old rules are going away and we're building them in real time?
I don't think the old rules are going to go away because there's a lot of lobbyists that are going to make sure that they're here to stay. But we love them. Yeah. I do think, though, we're not one of them, that there are brands that are just solely e-commerce. And there's a very weird little law in DC, actually, that of all places, DC, that allows you to ship to almost every single market, which is almost unheard of. And so, 10-to-1 rum, I believe, started completely e-commerce. So no real distributor whatsoever. You've got a warehouse in DC. You create, a awareness campaign on social media. There's a lot involved in that too. And there could be a lot of money spent on that. It's not the cheaper route to go by any stretch of the imagination.
Sure.
But they're effectively have cut out the distributor. Now that's one way. I don't think that it can't be like that forever. So whatever their end game
DC is tiny. There's a finite amount of warehouses in the District of Columbia.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
And they're not very
That's
tall.
right. Exactly. There's a height restriction there. So, I think, the 3-tiered system is here to stay. I just think that we've been able, with the help of technology advances due to COVID, we've been able to maybe accelerate some workarounds when you're starting a brand. And look, I think there's something to be said about, what Tito's and Sazerac did was very, very bold, right? And so
Huge.
Yeah. And that issue, obviously they're not small. So then their train of thought, I think, is, hey, we've spent all this money building this brand. We're selling this brand. Right now, all you're doing is taking the order and delivering, right? Why are we paying you so much? Mm-hmm. And so hence the Reyes, which is a way smaller
Reyes and Golden Brands. These are beer distributors that have taken
beer
on
distributors. They have 100% distribution, and their margins are way lower. So
yeah. Totally. It was a big middle finger to the distribution industry. But the opportunity to innovate that way is really cool. But also to collaborate and be open about these things that were so secretive. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're talking about agricultural products, right? So even kind of giving it back to like everyone who was part of that process, I think is a big part of it. You talked about like different types of cask finish, even just like farming the grains. Let's remember that this is something that took a village, and it's a beautiful thing at the end of the day. So I actually wanted to ask you about, we kind of touched a little bit on women in whiskey, and Greg had a conversation with an old boss from a brewery, right, Greg?
Oh, yeah. I was just chatting with someone that I used to work with yesterday, just on Instagram, struck up a conversation. She and I both used to work for a deeply abusive company. I'm not going to say them on the air, but if you know me, you know who they are. And we were having a really interesting conversation about whether or not the industry has actually gotten better when it comes to the way it treats, not only women, but people from the queer community, Black people, brown people, folks that don't look like Damon Souther and myself.
Right.
And the fundamental question was, the abuse was pretty out in the open in like the 2000s and 2010s. And I wonder if the industry has really gotten better, or if people have gotten better at pretending to be better. This is the question that was raised less than 24 hours ago, and so I'm still chewing on it. But seeing as this is something that you're very, very active in and passionate about, I wanted to sort of run that question past you.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. Are they better at pretending to be better? I'm going to say, in my experience, it's probably a little bit of both. When my time at Pernod, when Castle was acquired, Jefferson's moved over to Pernod almost immediately. And it was the first brand that they had in major spirits marketing since the Absolute acquisition. Usually the smaller brands go into new brand venture and they're kind of, training wheels, but we were all in. And at that same time, Pernod had just hired their first woman CEO, Ann Mukherjee, who was also a brown person. And, to me, Pernod had been probably years ahead of what I think even the conversations that we were seeing at that time were. There were so many females. There was, so many people of color, obviously with Absolute, very into the LGBTQ community. So I saw a really great sampling. It was definitely their message. And my response to that is, I think inclusivity is wonderful. It has to happen. No one should feel, I'll give you an opposite example here, but it has to be authentic and it has to be genuine. So you cannot push inclusivity for the sake of inclusivity, because that becomes very apparent. And I think when that happens, you start to see some grudges, you start to see some questioning. It actually almost does the exact opposite of what it set out to do by saying that everyone has an equal chance to be, great. And then when you're hiring someone that maybe is not so great because of inclusivity, it starts to make you question a little bit. So, I mean, that's my only, I've been very lucky that I've been in a room with a lot of men and never felt to be, a secretary, or, my opinions have always been listened to, whether they're valid or not. I've found, I worked with Trey for so long, with John, with the Don Papa people, who were pretty much women led as well. So it just hasn't been my experience. However, I am on the supplier side and mainly in marketing. I would say, not to shit on the distributors again, but we're going to. They probably they probably have some catching up to do. I do think, and especially in places like New York. And look, I'm married to a national sales director who his job is to manage distributors, and he's a white male. So, I see it. There's needs to be some catching up on the commercial sales side. Still feels a little bit like a boys' club there, but I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it's a matter of again, you want it to be the right people. And so how many women are actually going into sales? I started off bartending, then worked my way into promotional agency, then started as a New York Metro commercial rep for Terlato, and then, found my way into marketing. So, I think it's interesting to me that there is a whole department of our industry that tends to still be very male oriented. And I'm not quite sure why, but I think they have some catching up to do.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's we're not very great representatives of the diversity of people.
No, but I mean,
the three of us here, but no, I get what you're saying though, because it was definitely a male dominated industry, as most were, and now it's like everyone's catching up. That's the cool thing is but what's cool, like you pointed out, is that you can kind of tell who's doing it just for the sake of doing it, and who actually believes in it and backs their employees. And,
exactly.
This by the way, this interview has been fascinating to me. It's it's been more about people and we've talked about Whiskey Row, and we've talked about but I'm just fascinated by just the industrial side of the people who are in it, and the channels that bring it all about. It's I don't know. I said,
it's all an ecosystem. It's all interconnected, right? And one part affects the other part. Yeah. And I don't know. I made that noise because I worry. I guess I'm still concerned that that a lot of the social change that was really yelled about and advocated for and written about again and again and again and again and again on social media told people the right things to say, but that ecosystem, that distribution, and the fact that we're talking about these razor thin margins and these big shakeups that as we were talking about, Tito's and Sazerac just decided to completely upend the way they'd been distributing their products for a long time because there were deep economic incentives for that. I am concerned that the economics of it are so entrenched that true change of people's hearts and minds and mentalities is more difficult than an Instagram post. And I would love to sort of get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, no, you're right. I think when the larger multinationals do something even a little bit right, they exploit it. There's no other word for it. It does. It feels, and I think, and you guys are the great ones to talk about. Look at what happened during COVID, right? A lot of the larger brands did the right thing with the on-premise and the bartenders, and started USBG funds and hired them to create content digitally and socially, and all of that was very much for the almighty dollar when this thing settled down, because they knew they would be right back in the on-premise trying to sling their booze again, right? For me, that's interesting, and this isn't exactly what you're talking about, but it's a little bit of a parallel, in that same companies, as soon as COVID happened, completely dismantled their advocacy teams, right? And they furloughed their on-premise for a long time. So it's like, oh, look what I'm doing here. Look what I'm doing here. Don't look at what's happening over here. And I think that's just corporate. That transcends all categories of industries. To me, that's just corporate. And that's why, quite honestly, my year at Pernod, 14 months, and I was counting, there's, it's a great, the great people. I think it's not for me in terms of how I want to live my life and make my work feel like I'm a part of something bigger. But yeah, so I think that's just corporate America, buddy,
Yeah, I would agree. I think we certainly have these problems in our sector, but this is a problem that's universal.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're all working towards a better place. I don't think anyone is inherently evil and actively trying to be not better.
Right.
But the arc moves slowly, right?
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we're not curing cancer. We're coming together. We're having fun.
You never know.
Well, true.
There might be something in pumpkins that
bring that pumpkin out. Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, you never know. But
well, I feel like we've gotten into a little bit of a heavy place here, and we are towards the end. We should probably start kind of wrapping.
Sure.
And a new question we've been asking folks at the end of the show is maybe going to bring it back to the lighter side. Where have you been drinking these days?
Well, I'll say my spiel, and then I'll tell you a little bit more of some accuracy. No, if I'm going to sip, I love to sip on my whiskey row on the triple wood. We created the Vieux Carré with the whiskey row just because it just comes all together, having it start in New Orleans, knowing that that's our next adventure, and then using the cognac finish to really bring out some of those flavor profiles. So when I'm feeling like a decent cocktail, that's my go-to. But around 4:45, 5 o'clock, an Americano, just a Campari, vermouth, and club soda. It used to be Negronis, but I needed to cut back on the alcohol strength. So on the daily.
We're none of us 22 anymore, unfortunately.
That's right. And suffer from hangovers. So I'm very jealous of you, Southern.
No, you're
some
not.
of us do, some of us don't.
Incredible.
You're not jealous though. I do tell people all the time, like it's a tremendously double-edged sword, and I can sum it up in a pretty quick thing, and it revolves around New Orleans as well. I often say to people, "Yeah, I lived in New Orleans for 3 years," so they tell me. I don't suffer hangovers. This does not mean I don't get crazy blackout drunk
Amnesia.
if I go too far.
Oh, okay,
Right.
fair enough.
So it's got its downside for sure.
Okay, all right.
So if we're after the 4:15 Americano, if you're going out, because I know that you are part of the great I don't know if it's, I don't even want to say it was I guess just kind of the New York City tradition of moving from the East Village to Westchester. What are some, if any of our listeners happen to find themselves in your neck of the woods, where do you like to go for a drink around there?
Oh God, our favorite go-to is a place called 10510, and it's such a Westchester thing. Yeah, it's our zip code, right? Like our zip code's so great. We're going to name a restaurant 10510, but they've got fantastic. They've an incredible whiskey selection, fantastic cocktails, and my go-to whiskey drink out and about is paper plane. It's just, and it's still very discoverable, even with some bartenders up here, at least, that, wow, the whiskey can be refreshing and it's pink and it's delicious. And,
love pink drinks.
So yeah,
Personally.
pink drinks are great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Is part of the fun kind of being able to, do a little, I don't know. It almost, the way you're describing it almost kind of sounds like you with the paper plane, you're like pulling a quarter out from behind someone's ear and they're going, whoa, you can do that? Like, is
Exactly.
it kind of, is there a little bit of that thrill there to you?
Absolutely. I mean, to be able, I bartended for a very long time. There was very few things that people would come to the bar and tell me that I didn't already know, right? Like, to be that asshole.
Sure.
But when you're on the flip side of it and you can kind of give them something new, it's great. And also, listen, I'm in my early 40s. I've got a son. I live in the suburbs, right? I'm coming to the bar. They probably think I'm going to order a Sauvignon Blanc. So,
Right.
it's also a little bit of
You're a little paradigm breaking.
keeps you on your toes, don't pigeonhole. So
Got to keep the people guessing, man.
got to keep them guessing. Yeah.
Well, if our listeners wanted to follow along on your exploits and Whiskey Row's exploits, where would be a good place for them to find you on the great wide internet that we have?
Yeah. On Instagram, Whiskey Row Bourbon, at Whiskey Row Bourbon.
Cool.
Are you on Instagram? Are you playing this, this card face down?
I'm boring. My personal one is boring, but I did actually just start. I can't even believe I'm going to put this out there. I created a creative sort of Instagram page called Garnish and Garnish and Gown. So it's my love of very high-end fashion, which I'd never do anything with. I just really appreciate a well-structured dress, really beautiful designs, and cocktails. And so I get inspiration from some high fashion magazines and some designers, and I create a cocktail and a garnish that kind of is my interpretation of that.
Cool.
And so it's got 2 posts on there. I just started, but I've got a lot of.
This is when you get someone walking up to you and handing you that check for $1 million. It's all the hard work you've done in the whiskey industry and the spirits industry.
This is going to be it. Yeah.
This is going to be
the thing
it.
that you do 2 posts and you get a check for $1 million.
Yeah. Let's see. Hey, you know what? We can all retire. There you go.
Yeah.
But
Well,
Hey,
my
I'm all
Instagram
for
at
it.
this point is just my love of mixing drinks and being shirtless online. So that's follow your dreams as well.
Quenching his thirst while enticing yours. That's Greg.
if I were to do that, I think it'd have to be on OnlyFans then. So not good for Instagram.
You might be right.
For those prudes at Meta ruining everything for us.
Unbelievable.
Well, Angela, thank you so much for coming on. It's been
Angela.
great
Oh,
this was
chatting
so
with
much
you,
fun.
and
Thank
I've
you,
learned
guys.
a lot today.
One question for you, just
Yeah.
because we're at the end of the show. You mentioned your mother, and she was a bartender, and you were a bartender. What's your mother's name?
Oh, thank you for saying that. Her name was Olga, but her nickname was Augie, and she was quick with a joke and a smile. And thank you for
There's
asking.
Augie.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Cheers to Augie.
Well, that's going to do it for us this week on the Speakeasy. But if you still want more, you can become a regular on our Patreon. That's where you'll get longer episodes with bonus content, no ads, cocktail recipes from all of our guests, and a free cocktail kit each month from our friends at Shaker and Spoon. Angela was actually nice enough to stick around after the show stopped recording to talk about some topics we really wanted to get into but didn't have time for on our regular episode, including the recent acquisition of Lalo by Tito. So if you want to hear that and more bonus content, sign up and become a regular on our Patreon. You will also get access to our monthly after hours hangouts where me and Souther and Damon at participating locations hang out live and take your questions and do a little drink along, as we talked about at the top of the show. If you want to submit slightly less unhinged suggestions for what we want to drink at the end of this month, drop it in the comments. Send us a DM. I don't know. Send us a carrier pigeon with a little note tapped to its leg. However you want
Message
to do it,
on
just give us your
OnlyFans.
suggestions. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know what? We're on all platforms, all channels, terrestrial and satellite. And of course, if you want to follow along and see the pumpkins that Damon has been trotting out during this episode, we are on YouTube. There's no paywalls. It's free to join. And while you're there, hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment and a review. If you're feeling frisky, that is youtube.com/@speakeasy.podcast. And be sure to tune in next week when our guest is going to be Aaron Baker and Evan Buteris, Butters, I don't know. He'll tell me. Of Oscar Blues. That is the OG craft beer in a can. Excited to talk to them about that. We will catch you right back here for that frothy conversation. But for today, cheers, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
So you don't charm the devil with your rock and roll load. Knows that country music's gonna save your soul. The devil runs his groove in them rhythm and blues that sound. It's gonna